Hi, welcome back to the Mom and Co podcast. My name is Bopa and I am your host. Today on episode 7, I am going to be talking to you about the loss of my dad. During this time, Sully said to me, losing your dad is going to change you. I didn't really know what he was talking about at the time. I only saw surface level of understanding that I will miss my dad, but I didn't understand the depth of what he said until just a few years ago. And so I am going to take you back to the day that I lost him and what I learned about honoring his life, his legacy, and the things that I carry with me. So my dad passed away on February 12th, 2017, and it was 6 days after my 34th birthday. It was just interesting leading up to this day because the following year in 2016, so many things happened that I don't know if we could have ever planned for it. So in 2016, in the summer, one of my cousin's kids got married in Seattle, and my dad went. At first, he didn't want to go because he just wasn't feeling well. My dad has suffered a brain aneurysm back in 2009, and then he was diagnosed with dementia, I want to say 2011 or so. And then he got into a car accident, a really bad one, in 2014. So it seemed like anytime I gave birth, my dad had something going on, whether it is a brain aneurysm, a stroke, dementia, and then the car accident. It was a lot to deal with. Being a new mom changed me. Losing the version of my dad that I've always known, that changed me. But I didn't recognize it at the time. I was just fighting this fight that I didn't realize I was fighting because everything seemed so hard and it felt like I could never catch a break. Looking back now, I wish I had the wisdom I have today then, but I didn't. And so I want to share them with you so that way, if you're walking through this path right now, I want to share with you some of the things that I've learned along the way that I wish I knew. So, going back to the summer of 2016, my dad decided that he wanted to go to Seattle with us. And I was like, this is amazing because I feel like it's been a while since my dad saw the family in Seattle. So we go. This is crazy. Okay. So we have the 4 kids. The youngest would have been 2. The oldest would have been like, what's 8 or 7 or so. And I do remember being seated with just me and my dad in the back of the airplane with all the kids. My mom was in a seat on her own. Sully was on a seat of his own. I don't know why I didn't have, well, I know why. I was too scared. But I should have been able to ask the flight attendant if we can swap seats and like be able to have Sully be with me to help me with the kids and my dad. But I remember being in the back seat and I was just like, this is bullshit. Like, I'm back here with my dad that needs a lot of assistance and I got 4 kids. Like, how is this my luck? Like, I don't even know what we were thinking, but obviously I wasn't thinking because I took on that responsibility and it was not an easy ride. And I remember someone telling me to give my youngest one some Benadryl and I didn't listen because I was like, well, she doesn't have allergies. So I'm not giving her Benadryl. And that was when I was very literal. And so on our way back home, I did give her Benadryl. Judge me, don't judge me, but it worked and we were able to come home in a way better condition than we did when we went there. So that's what I did. But I remember just having this chaos of a trip there. However, when we were there, I realized that so many people miss my dad. And my dad loved seeing everybody and not realizing it was going to be his last time seeing everybody. And I thought it was so brave of him and strong of him to just be able to show up. And when we got back home, he went back to being, like himself. And he was in a wheelchair already at the time. And at the end of 2016, there's one wish that my dad had for all of us 8 kids, that all of us would go back to Cambodia at least once. And all of us had gone back besides my one of my brothers, Soka. He had not gone back, but that winter in 2016, he went back for the very first time with a buddy of his and my mom. And during that time that they went to Cambodia, I went to Paris and London, which was not in the cards, especially having those many young kids. My childhood best friend had just broken up with her boyfriend of 10 years. And so her sister reached out to me and was like, hey, do you think you can go to Paris with Hiang and go for like 10 days? The tickets were only like $400 out of Chicago. And I was like, I mean, that's a really great deal. And I was like, I do want to go to Paris. I want to go visit my uncle and my cousins. My dad's cousin, which is my uncle, he lived there, and he was the first person to send me a wedding gift when we got engaged, because he knew he couldn't make it to the wedding, and so he sent a gift. And he always told me that his door is always open whenever I go to Paris. He wants to see me there. And so that was the first thing I thought of when my friend had asked me if I would go with her sister. And so I asked Sully, and he said yes, but he wasn't happy about it. Because we talked about it. Now looking back, he was like, we were in no position for you to go, but that's what you wanted to do. And so I was able to spend some time with my childhood best friend. We haven't really spent a whole lot of time together because I had 4 kids and she was, living this life and now going through a breakup, very opposite of my life. And we got to visit one of our friends, Mano, that lives in London. And we actually got her out of work. She's a teacher. We got her out of work and brought her to Paris with us. And that was so much fun. And now I look back to, because I was in Paris with my dad's favorite cousin, and my mom and my brother was with all of his family in Cambodia, and we all got to FaceTime my dad. It was just a very cool thing looking back, not knowing that it was going to be his last time ever seeing his family in Seattle, in Paris, and in Cambodia. I mean, that's all of his family. And I look back at a lot of the losses that I've had, in seeing all the signs leading up to it has been very comforting now when I look back. But at the time, it just felt strange and I didn't know what to believe. It was just always kind of like, okay, well, that was kind of weird. But now that I've gone through a few more losses, I've just been able to really find the beauty in the signs. And when my dad passed away on that specific day in 2017, I remember thinking to myself how guilty I kind of felt, because so he passed away on a Sunday, and on that Saturday before, that day before, I was at the salon that I worked at, and I was super busy. And so my family thread was going off. I mean, I remember coming back to my phone and seeing over 100 something messages. I didn't look through them because I had a dinner date afterwards that I was trying to get to, and I was running behind with work. Now I can see that my dad was actually calling for me. So getting the stories from my husband and from my mom, my dad was asking for me, and instead solely went down there and solely thought at one point he thought that my dad was gone. Um, and so he panicked, and then my dad, like, I think woke up and was like, "No, I'm fine. I'm okay." So Solly didn't think anything of it, but he did text the family to let them know what just happened. I didn't read it because it was so, I mean, there were so many messages that I just was like, I'm not going to read it. If it's important, someone will tell me. But no one mentioned anything. So I didn't even like cancel dinner, because had I known, I would have canceled dinner and would have went home, but went straight to dinner instead with some friends. And when I got home like 10 that evening, I didn't realize, I mean, I realized that it was late, that I wasn't going to go check on my dad. And so I just went to bed. The next morning was when I heard from my mom that something's not right with my dad. And so we live in a ranch style home, and my family's upstairs and my mom and dad are downstairs. And so I went downstairs and I realized that my dad is not waking up. I've never seen death before. So I didn't understand what was happening. I just knew something wasn't right. And so I reached out to his doctor, and I forgot who I was talking to, but someone said I had to call the funeral home. But then in my mind, I was like, well, he's not really gone yet. What if he wakes up? You know, you have all this hope. And then they told me I had to call the ambulance or when he passes away, I have to call the ambulance. And so I just waited until then, and instead called my family, which then word got really fast. And all of a sudden, my house is filled with a lot of the community members. And when they all came over, it was like after 10 a.m. It was just a full house, but like we all kept going in and out of the room and talking to him. And I remember like telling him thank you for giving me life and giving me the life that I have. And I saw tears come down. That was my first time ever seeing tears from my dad, because my dad has never cried in front of me. So I wasn't sure what I was seeing. I didn't know if he could hear me or not, but I knew at this point I have nothing to lose. I am just going to say everything that I want to say to him. And so I now realize that they can still hear. And so I know he heard me, and that gives me comfort knowing that he heard my gratitude for him. And as everybody was going in and out of the room, there was a moment where it was just me and Sully in the room. And that was when he passed. The house was filled, but when everyone was in the room, he stayed alive. Then when it was just me and Sully for the first time in the room is when he took his last breath. And I started making phone calls, and I did not know this, but when the ambulance and stuff came, they brought the medical examiner, and because we weren't in hospice or palliative care, it's treated as a crime scene, which I was like, what? Like, I had no idea. But I understand. I get it now. Because there's can be so many things, that could have happened. It could have been a homicide. It could have been so many things. So I learned that. And then I remember the medical examiner, she pulled me and my mom aside, and she's like, I just wanted to tell you guys that I wanted to say how great you guys took care of your dad, because you can tell he was well cared for just by everything around his room. And I was like, that's really cool to hear, because you never know when you're caring for someone, you don't really know how you're doing, so to hear like a medical examiner that has seen so many different scenarios tell you that you're doing a good job. I knew like how my mom loved my dad so much. and the way she cared for him all the way through when he was in palliative care a few times, and they told us many times that he was not going to make it after having his aneurysm. There was a few times where it was just like, gosh, I'm about to lose my dad, but he never did. And so I think back at my mom and I'm like, gosh, that woman she knows how to like care for people, to make them be so strong. And I just admire that so much about my mom, seeing how she takes care of him. There are so many things that I want to say to my dad at the time. And I remember when I had to write his eulogy, I didn't even know his life before coming to America. It was my first time in 34 years that I ever even thought about that, because I only saw the version of him where he rebuilt his life in America. I only heard of some of the Cambodian stories from my mom. She was the only one that spoke of them, because they were not like, they were kind of raw and hard and very traumatic. My dad never once talked about it. And now that I've talked to my mom, she's always told me that he wanted to bury those stories. And when I lost him, it made me wish that I had asked my dad deep questions. But at the time, I didn't even know myself, yet alone get to know someone else, when I think I was just in this like survival mode. And losing my dad has helped me be more curious and to realize that he wasn't perfect, because I really did think my dad was perfect. Losing him made me realize he's human. And I've been collecting a lot of his stories since my journey of finding myself, because everything led me back to him and my mom. And so I've been able to just get all the stories, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and I love it, because it allowed me to understand him more deeply now that he's not here. I wish that I could have done it when he was alive, but unfortunately that didn't happen. And so sharing my story, I hope that it empowers you to ask your parents these hard questions, the truth of who they are, because at the end of the day, we all have a story, and that story shapes us to who we are today. And I think the more that we know about each other's stories, the more that we can actually have a guide for life. And I think for me, going back to my mom to ask these questions that I didn't know how to ask before, and to get the answers, it's such a gift to be able to feel my dad, even though he's not here. And it has helped me understand what he has gone through too, because when in 2023, when I really began the journey of discovering myself, there's a nonprofit organization, the Angkor Wat Friendship Association, that my dad started back in the 80s. All the board members were just disappearing, and they reached out to me and was like, if you don't take it over, we're going to have to shut it down. And so I was like, well, I don't want that to die. So the fear of the community nonprofit dying scared me. So then I was like, okay, I'll do it. And knowing that I had a lot to work on myself, but I was willing to save something because I knew how important it was for our community. So I get into this, I become the president. I brought on like about 15 other people. So I was like, okay, this is great. Maybe this is my path. And as I got into it, I realized like, oh shit, our community members are dying. Like, and that was very, very scary for me because the first event that I had to do, which was the Cambodian New Year, that's what I thought I was doing. And I remember going back to when my dad did it, I felt kind of his way of doing things. And that's kind of how I knew what to do. But then all these deaths start happening. And so I remember going to these funerals, and because now I'm the president, they're asking me to go speak. And I'm like, I can't talk. Like, I've only spoke at my dad's funeral, my nephew's funeral, but I don't know how to speak like in front of like community members. And they made me go up there, and I would literally just cry because I didn't know how to compose myself. And then also, no one told me I was going to have to do it. They would just pull me up on the stand at the place. That was very hard. And then I started like realizing that there was community members that were laughing at me because they're like, oh, there she goes. She's going to be crying again. And then sure enough, I go up there and I'm crying because I'm realizing that our community members are dying at a very fast pace. And a lot of them are dying with their stories to the grave. And also, I realized that they're all young. Like, how are we not able to prevent some of these things? And then it started making me think about, oh, yeah, they probably suppress their stories, their feelings. And all these illnesses are probably from the traumatic experiences that they've had being the survivors of the Cambodian genocide. So it really hit me like a ton of brick, like that I had community members here that needed deeper healing. But yet I was in an organization where we're celebrating the beauty of our culture, the foods, which I love. I don't get me wrong, I love that stuff. But I found myself in a position where I felt hopeless. And then it started making me think of my dad. I started thinking about what he was doing in the community. He was doing so much. I remember he was translating, he was filling out paperwork, he was getting people jobs, homes. I couldn't even get past the part where people are dying right now. Like I think in that 2 years of being president, I think I went to 8 funerals. That's a lot. And I knew at that moment that I had a different path that I had to take. I needed to go back and really focus on myself. So I knew how to hold space for myself and others because I was overconsumed, and I almost felt like I couldn't make any moves for the community because I was so stuck in this grief from my community members that didn't have a chance to really share their stories. And following my dad's footstep led me to even more deeper purpose. My dad was able to create a community of Cambodians in the state of Iowa and then also the Midwest to bring them together to rebuild their lives. And I feel like my purpose now is, okay, the majority of us have rebuilt our lives, but can we go a little bit deeper? Can we go in and hear all the different stories, the hardships, the struggles, and also the beauty, so we can see the hope in the stories, but then also be that bridge that helps them heal. when they weren't able to, because as they've come to America, they've had to learn how to just survive. And then it gets passed on to us kids, and we don't know what's wrong with us. And when we're disconnected from our families. And so that's where all of this has led me to. And that's what also led me to just be honest with who I am, what I struggle with, and to connect with others that maybe are going through the same thing. And maybe we can, the more we talk about it, the more we can actually share what has worked and what hasn't, and that we're never alone. And that's kind of my whole thing with like rediscovering myself led me to not just my parents, it led me to my community members. And it just has helped me really take the torch that my dad passed on to me and to really go a little bit deeper. And I realized that losing my dad, although it was sad, what a light for me to really keep going with his legacy that he wasn't able to fully finish. And I won't be able to fully finish all this either, but it's a path to be able to pass to the next generation. And I think that when you lose someone that is such a huge pillar in the community, you can't help but reflect back on the work they did and to carry on the legacy and to pass it on to the younger generations and multiple different families, because it takes a whole village to really grow and heal one another. And I didn't realize then that losing my dad was going to show me all the work that he has done, because I remember at his funeral, we filled a whole gymnasium at East High School, and their motto is for the service of humanity. And I remember thinking, that's my dad. Like, I'm so proud to be his daughter. And to see all the people show up to honor his life made me realize, like, yes, he has gone through so much and he didn't share all of it with us, but he decided to focus on the positive things. And those were the lessons that he left with me. And he also said to me, don't yell at your kids. And I remember thinking, you yell at us, so what are you talking about? And then when I really slowed down to really hear what he was saying and to actually see how I saw things, did I realize that I put my parents together as one, when in reality, it was my mom that yelled a lot. My dad didn't yell at us. And I think he realized, because he did say to me, that yelling doesn't do anything to the kids. Take time to talk to them. Sometimes I feel like when you're not able to do those things, like my dad was not a huge like talker in the house. He would do the work outside the house and we would be able to see him do the work. And so then we would follow suit. But he never really said why he was doing something or telling us to do something. He just did it and we just watched. And I had a bad problem of yelling at my kids before, because that's what my mom did. And that's what I learned to do. I can tell you that in the last 3 years, I hardly yell. Like, it's crazy. So all the things that my dad has told me is a really true thing. I just had to figure it out. And he said to not forget about the family and the community members. So every time I'm in the community at the temple, I always think of my dad and I always think about what he said. And I honor his legacy and I honor the people before us, because when I see that there's not many of them left and that we are the new generation of adults, which is really hard to really like understand because sometimes I feel like a kid myself. But I just think about all of them, how they've all shaped me in different ways. And it has inspired me to really stay connected to the roots of where we come from and to really hold space for people, especially those that don't have anyone to really talk to. And I just realized that everything that he just shared with me or modeled to me was going to be the thing that helps me this year. So losing my dad, all the things that I didn't understand, I didn't see the signs. I was able to see the signs in my brother-in-law that I lost this year and my father-in-law that I lost this year. And in the next episode, I am going to be talking about that. I'm going to go into the things that I was able to see this time around with the loss of my brother-in-law and my father-in-law that I did not see with my dad. And I hope that if you are walking through grief and you're carrying it, remember to slow down, pause, and think about your loss and think about how it has shaped you and the positive things about it. Because I do believe that death brings a lot of sadness, yes, a lot of void, yes, but it also brings beauty in the little things in life. And I hope that you can see that in all of your losses, that there is beauty, and that when anything dies, something grows. So thank you for listening to the story of the loss of my dad and how it changed me. And in the next episode, I'll tell you more on all the signs that has allowed me to really be strong inwards to handle the next two losses. Until next time, I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.